What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a look at our running back rankings for the 2022 fantasy football season, along with what tiers they belong in. So we're going to break all of that down. Should be great. As always, if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Make sure to check out the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide, now available for purchase, which has rankings like these and more, including individual player bios, more in-depth analysis, top 150 overall player rankings in standard and PPR formats, along with general fantasy advice. Details into the description, so make sure to check that out. But with that being said, let's dive into this thing. Now, a quick note, this will be PPR based, so keep that in mind. If you guys want to see standard rankings for the running back position, we can do that in future videos. And we're probably going to split this up into two parts. So today we're going to look at our top 12 running backs, and then later on we will break it down from 12 to 24, etc., etc. But with that in mind, we're going to kick it off here, and as you can see, we have got our rankings kind of organized with our tier one guys. At number one, it is Christian McCaffrey. And I know what everyone's going to say. How can you have Christian McCaffrey as the number one guy? He has burned me over and over these last 2 years. He is injury prone. I do not want to take a chance on him, just too risky for the 101. And if that's your mindset, I completely understand it. And that's a completely valid mindset to have if you want to go with for example, Jonathan Taylor, who, spoiler, is our number two guy on this list. But the reason we have McCaffrey at the number one spot is, simply put, when you do these rankings, when you do these projections, you do it on an assumption that a full season will be played. And in that scenario, Christian McCaffrey is the number one guy. Simply put, in PPR formats, look, he's the last player to go for 1,000 season. He is a cheat code in PPR formats, regardless of who his quarterback is, whether it's a run-heavy quarterback like a Cam Newton, whether it's a garbage quarterback like Sam Darnold. It doesn't matter. McCaffrey gets it done. He's so utilized in the passing attack for the Panthers. And then he's also going to be heavily utilized as a rusher. Now, maybe not as heavily as he was 2 years ago, but it'll still be a decent chunk. And for that reason, because he can get you 1,000+ yards on the ground and close to 1,000 yards through the air, that's what's going to make him the PPR guy to target. Simply kind of dissecting it, when he's been healthy these last 2 years, during even this injury span, when he's on the field, he's sensational, and he is a tier one running back. And for that reason, he is our number one pick here, our number one running back. But let's move on to number two. That's where Jonathan Taylor comes in. And with Jonathan Taylor, he was the number one running back across all formats last season. Definitely probably, the safer choice, a little bit younger, not as quote-unquote injury prone. He's on a good offense with a stable offensive line, a little bit of an upgrade at quarterback with Matt Ryan as well, in my opinion. And realistically speaking, I think he's only one of two running backs that has, 20+ touchdown upside. He's going to be one of the favorites to potentially lead the league in rushing yards as well. So he is somebody that we really like as well, but his pass catching upside won't quite be as high. Nyheim Hines is still there. That's still kind of his role that, he commands, but Taylor will still probably get you around 40 catches. If it's a really good year, 50 catches on the season, that would be my guess. But you're drafting him because of his touchdown upside. You're drafting him because of his rushing upside. And all those things are good enough to still land him in that tier one category. I think he's going to have elite usage behind a good offensive unit with a good offensive line. So for that reason, he is our number two guy. If you want to flip-flop these two guys, we have zero issues with that. But let's move on to our tier two kind of category. And here we start with Austin Eckler. And we were beating the drum for Austin Eckler last season. I would go out on a ledge and say that we probably were the highest on Eckler from the earliest point in time in terms of like all fantasy analysts out there. We were telling you the guy's worthy of a top 3 pick. He finishes the number 2 fantasy football running back across all formats. He's in a tremendous offense with a great young quarterback in Justin Herbert and an elite offensive line as well. Eckler is peppered with targets. He should easily be in the top 5, with guys like McCaffrey, Kamara, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift in terms of targets, pass catching targets at the running back position, in terms of receptions, receiving yards as well for running backs. That was the case last season. I don't see anything changing this year. Isaiah Spiller was added via the draft, but he's not really that pass-catching guy. He's maybe going to be a bruising type of running back, short distance type of situation. Now, I know what a lot of people are saying. Well, Austin Eckler, he had insane touchdown success last season. It's probably not going to continue. And I would tend to agree with that. That's why he's in this next tier for me. That's why if you want to have somebody like a Dalvin Cook higher, I have zero issues with that. And that's why I probably would say that the return on investment for Austin Eckler this season won't quite be as high as it was last year, because now the price tag, very, very expensive. And I wouldn't be shocked if he has a little bit of a regression in the touchdown department, which is so important. But that's just a category that's so variable year to year, and that could hurt him a little bit. But I still think in PPR formats, he's a pretty safe guy, especially to be in the top 5. But let's move on afterwards. Next, we have Dalvin Cook for the Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook is a guy that just continuously gets it done. He didn't have the most touchdown success last season. He was a little bit banged up. Could have done a little bit more in the pass catching department as well, but he is still a very well-rounded running back. For the most part, no major changes to this Minnesota offense. You've still got the core pieces there, and like Dalvin Cook's still just a year removed from being an elite fantasy running back producer. He's still young. The only thing that I would say here is if you go with Dalvin Cook, at some point you do have to give serious thought to getting Alexander Mattison as a handcuff, because Cook has been known to miss a game or two here and there, and Mattison is a proven backup for Dalvin Cook that has, starred in fantasy matchups when Cook has been unavailable. But overall, I think Cook is going to be, again, probably in the top 5 for rushing yards. I think his touchdown upside is going to improve. And just in general, I think he's going to have a bounce back season, if you will, compared to 2021. I still view him as, again, a top 5 running back. Then going to number 5, we have Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. Maybe in your opinion, a little bit high for him, considering it's PPR and Henry might only catch like between 20 to 30 if you want to be really optimistic, balls on the year. But what we can't deny is the guy has 2,000 plus yard rushing upside. He's got 20 touchdown plus upside. I kind of put him in that category with Jonathan Taylor. One of these guys is probably going to lead the league in rushing yards. I mean, hell, the guy pretty much missed half the season last year and was still, like a top 20 running back, which is insane to think about. Still almost had 1,000 yards rushing. And I mean, it just tells you how valuable he is to that offense. The wear and tear will come at some point, but I still think that 2022, this year, looking at it, he will be fine. I am a little bit, kind of skeptical of this Tennessee offense. I'm not the biggest Ryan Tannehill believer, but to me, even with how much he struggled last season, Derrick Henry was still doing his thing. So I think that Henry can be another viable option yet again. I obviously have him higher in standard formats. I'd have him in my tier 1 category, but here because he isn't in the class of these other running backs in terms of pass catching ability and usage, he does get a little bit of a knock, but still I think he's a pretty safe bet to be right on that borderline of a top 5 running back. Afterwards, we get to Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Harris is probably, out of these guys, the one that I struggle the most to rank, because last year, what he did was as a pass catcher was absolutely bananas, but I do not think that he's going to duplicate that effort this season in terms of like a top three pass catching season from the running back position. I don't think his reception count will be as high. Last year was a season where Big Ben kind of just focused in on the short passing attack, and whoever was there, he was peppering with targets. And this year, whether it's Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, I don't see Harris getting as many of those easy targets. And, look, in general, this offense has more pass catchers. Juju Smith was injured for the majority of the season last year. Now you've added rookie wide receiver help. You've still got Claypool. You've still got Deontay Johnson. And honestly, there still could be some question marks about the Pittsburgh offensive line, but those were there last season, and Najee Harris was able to overcome it. So I'm not horribly worried about that. I'm just saying that's something to keep, in the back of your minds. And the thing that worries me the most here is the quarterback situation. I'm not a Mitch Trubisky believer. If he's the guy, I think that you're potentially going to take away some of that rushing upside from Najee Harris, because Trubisky is going to be utilizing his legs. And then if it's Kenny Pickett, maybe defenses can kind of take advantage of the rookie situation and force the Steelers to beat them on the ground. But either way, I still think what we saw from Najee Harris in a bad situation last year was so, kind of impressive that this season we could expect something similar. And if he completely busts, that would be a surprise in my eyes, because if he was able to succeed with what the Steelers had last year, I think he should be able to do similar to the same this year as well. Then at number 7, we get to Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Jones is one of my absolute favorite running backs this season. Honestly, it wouldn't shock me if he moves up a little bit higher in my rankings come closer to September. And this has everything to do with Davante Adams no longer being with the Green Bay Packers, because in that sample size, when Davante Adams doesn't play for the Packers and Aaron Jones is available, Jones pretty much becomes their top pass catcher, and that's so valuable in PPR formats. I put him in that sense in the Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara type of conversation, hell, maybe even a Christian McCaffrey type of situation. I think that he's arguably the most trusted weapon for Aaron Rodgers at this point in time. I still have faith in this offense as long as Aaron Rodgers is there. I don't buy into the whole A.J. Dillon is going to take over this backfield, or that, he's going to be the primary rusher. No. Aaron Jones is still the primary guy. It might be a 65-35 split, but he's still the guy as a rusher. He's sure as hell the guy here as a pass catcher as well. I think you're going to see close to 1,000 yards rushing. I think you're going to see a lot of success from him as a pass catcher. I absolutely love him this season. The fact you can get him in the late second round is an absolute travesty. The guy should absolutely be a first-round pick. Then let's move on to Alvin Kamara. Now, Kamara is an interesting one because with him, is he going to face a possible suspension? Obviously, if he does, then you're going to see him go down these rankings, because, we still haven't heard what's going to happen to him because of his Pro Bowl incident. Now, even if he is suspended, I would assume it wouldn't be for all that long. But the fact that you've had guys like a David Johnson visiting the Saints in the offseason here, maybe New Orleans is showing their hand a little bit with Kamara. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just them doing their homework. But either way, if we look at Kamara not being suspended with Jameis Winston at the quarterback position, that's the most important thing here. Because if it was Taysom Hill or if it was some rookie quarterback unproven, we saw what that was like for the Saints last year. With Taysom Hill under quarterback and Alvin Kamara, in my opinion, has no business sniffing the first 2 rounds of fantasy drafts, because teams can stop their running attack and then Kamara doesn't get as many targets. And at certain points last season, unless the matchup was absolutely a cakewalk, Kamara was, outside the running back 2 conversation while Jameis Winston was hurt. But with him back this season, I think Kamara is going to, again, show us what he did at the beginning of the year while Winston was the quarterback. And that was like a top 5 ish running back and for fantasy football purposes. But again, here the biggest thing with Kamara is what will happen with that possible suspension. But if he plays the full season, I think this is right around where you can expect to see him when it's all said and done. Then coming in at number 9, we have got DeAndre Swift. Swift is a guy that I really like as a potential breakout candidate this year. He was on a great trajectory last year, but then he got hurt. But while playing for the Lions, he was seeing a ton of targets. He was seeing the majority of usage. All that smoke about Jamal Williams, a hot hand approach with the running backs. It was just that. It was smoke. DeAndre Swift is the guy. The Lions have a very underrated offensive line as well, and I do think that Swift is going to see the type of usage that he was seeing last season. I love him in PPR formats. He's, to me, kind of maybe that next Austin Eckler, an Austin Eckler light, if you will. To me, the only thing that's slightly concerning, I know a lot of people are saying that he's going to be, a guy that's a top 3 running back, top 4 running back in PPR formats, and saying that he's going to see this crazy usage in terms of pass catching. And while I agree to it with that to some extent, the fact that the Lions have added so many new pass catchers and so many guys are returning healthy, TJ Hawkinson returning healthy, Amon-Ra still there. They added DJ Shark. They added Jameson Williams via the draft. So all those guys are bona fide producers, and they're going to take away targets. So one of these pass catchers here for the Lions is going to disappoint a little bit in terms of volume. It could be Swift. I'm not sure. That's why I have him right around this spot. But either way, I still think he should be close to an RB1 in PPR formats, and definitely has a really high ceiling as well. Next, we go to our tier 3 category. And, for me, this tier 3 is right around where we get to some more potentially one-dimensional guys where the upside isn't as high for pass catching abilities. But, 1 or 2 of these guys will definitely challenge to be in that tier 2. Saquon Barkley is my next guy at number 10. I think he's obviously had 2 very rough seasons, but now after being another year removed from his injury, he's still one of the top offenses, if not the top offensive weapons for the New York Giants. The offensive line has been improved, which I like to see. And, the rushing attack should continue to be a focus to take pressure off Daniel Jones. And despite all the wide receivers that the Giants have, Daniel Jones is still going to be looking for Saquon Barkley for those short and intermediate dump-offs. So I think Saquon Barkley honestly bounces back in a big way and reminds people that he is a top 10 running back in this league. I kind of envision a Todd Gurley-esque renaissance for Saquon Barkley. If you guys remember his rookie season, he absolutely balled out. Then the next year kind of just really struggled, but a bad offensive line, just a bad situation, and then bounced back afterwards with 2 back-to-back RB1 finishes for fantasy football purposes. I'm not saying that's what Barkley is going to do, but, it's possible. It's definitely possible. And the fact that you can get him at the end of the 2nd round, even in the 3rd round of fantasy football drafts, I am smashing the draft button all day, every single day in that scenario. I think Barkley can absolutely be an RB1. I'm not punishing him for the mess that was the New York Giants last year. I think that they have improved since then and the situation is better. He's healthier, so all those things are positives for Barkley. Next, we go to number 11, Joe Mixon. Maybe in some people's eyes a little bit disrespectful considering the season that he just had, but look, last year, a lot of these guys were injured. We didn't have a McCaffrey. Derrick Henry was hurt. DeAndre Swift got hurt. So Saquon Barkley obviously wasn't his usual self. So Joe Mixon was, a top 5 guy. He was somebody that finally had that quote-unquote breakout, and he's in a great offense. The Bengals upgraded the offensive line. Joe Burrow was there. All those pass catchers are there. And I do think he's got obviously, the same type of upside this season, but I just don't see the pass catching upside there for Mixon, which is why I have him a little bit lower. Definitely would be higher in standard formats. I'm curious to see, if the Bengals have any type of Super Bowl hangover or, any struggles this year. But I anticipate that they're going to have a pretty good season again. Offensively, all the weapons are there as long as Joe Burrow is healthy. He's proven that he can get it done. And I think Mixon is somebody that, again, probably is going to be drafted at the end of the first round. Maybe there's some recency bias there, but I think that provides a great opportunity for you to take advantage of some of the names that we've already mentioned a little bit later on. But either way, I don't want to use that as a reason to knock Joe Mixon. If you want to make the argument that he should be in the top 10, I literally have him right outside it, then I am very willing to hear you out. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But let's get to our last guy here at number 12. Maybe the biggest surprise on this list, that is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. In my opinion, Etienne, is the guy in terms of a breakout season in 2022. And it has everything to do with the fact that James Robinson, I don't think, is really going to play this season. He's coming off a late season Achilles injury. If he's ready by week 1, I would be absolutely shocked. I mean, we just saw what Cam Akers did with his rehab, which was amazing. But on the flip side, we saw how much he struggled when he was on the field. He just wasn't himself. And for that reason, I'm not really all that worried about James Robinson. Now, if the Jaguars come out between now and September and say, yeah, okay, James Robinson is like 100%, he's going to play this entire season, it's going to be a 50-50 split or something like that, then yes, I will have Etienne lower on my rankings. He won't be a top 12 guy. But this is under the assumption that it's going to be primarily Travis Etienne this year, and James Robinson isn't really going to be a factor. Because what that means is Etienne is not only going to be the primary pass catcher, which is kind of what we were expecting from him last year prior to his injury and what he was drafted for, but he's also going to be the primary rusher. I think he can get like an 800 type of season very easily. He has the connection, with Trevor Lawrence, and I think that this Jaguars offense immediately is so much more improved not having Urban Meyer there. So I'm excited for this team, for the Jaguars, specifically for Etienne. He's somebody that's going in the 4th, 5th round, potentially, depending on the size of your leagues. I would have zero issues drafting him in the 3rd round. Honestly, just because it'd be considered a major reach in the 2nd round. But if you believe in him, I totally get it. I think his ADP is going to skyrocket once we get closer to September. But Etienne is another guy that I really, really like, kind of in that DeAndre Swift, sort of mold, expectation-wise. I think that he is somebody that if you can get as your flex running back, you're absolutely doing great. I see tremendous things for him, at least for 2022. Once 2023 hits and Robinson is back, then that's a whole nother conversation. But short term, I really do like Travis Etienne. But with that, we kind of wrap up this breakdown of our top 12 guys. Let us hear in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? Who would you have higher? Who would you have lower? Did we maybe omit somebody? We're going to do a part 2 of this, looking at our top 24 guys, so don't worry. But in the meantime, again, if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Make sure to check out our 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Has rankings like these and more. Details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.